by a Nazi-style party of Jew hatred. It's coming faster than you think. Even now, while we have the unbelievable spectacle last night of dozens of White House workers demonstrating with masks on.
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the Books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Welcome to the Edwin Black Show. I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and author of 200 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide, including IBM and the Holocaust, and the Farhud, Roots of the Arab-Nazi Alliance in the Holocaust, which described a bloody and animalistic massacre in Hebron in 1929, and then again in Baghdad in 1941, and both of them were quite similar to the ones we saw unfold in Israel October 7th, 2 months ago. If you like our show's content, spread the word. You can subscribe for alerts at theedwinblackshow.com. And if you want to support our work, please visit theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. Please know this show is a worldwide volunteer effort and totally unmonetized. As it is the end of the year and the giving season, take a minute, please. Help us maintain our extremely high level of excellence and firm documentation. Our world is specifically threatened by ignorance and misinformation. We're at the tip of the spear of facts in context. Go to theedwinblackshow.com/support and thank you. We have solidarity today from many national organizations, such as the Emerson Family Foundation, the Fuel Freedom Foundation, the Israel on Campus Coalition, as well as Stand With Us, JNS, the Israeli American Council, EMET, American Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists, Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, ZOA Michigan, the Gross Family Center, Americans for Peace and Tolerance, and plenty more. Thank you, everyone. That said, I only speak for myself and for history. Today's episode is sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by the just released third edition of Ken Abramowitz's best-selling and painfully predictive book, The Multi-Front War, and it's co-sponsored by Caring Physicians in Maryland. Today, we welcome guests from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the villages, Newton, Mass., Chicago, and Tampa Bay. Overseas, I see viewers logged on from, again, we have Australia, New Zealand, we see Holland, France, Italy, Spain, Germany, Morocco, Great Britain, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, I see Paraguay, India, and Israel, plus other countries. If you have a question limited to today's topic, place one short sentence in Zoom's QA feature. The Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, is global and fast growing, enjoying many tens of thousands of views. We speak frankly and without tremor to a fragmented world, seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present very, very tense, and a future still uncertain. And remember, we will not be censored. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom at the very end of the show, just before I sign off. We'll get to our unhappy episode, World War J, Part 2, in a few minutes after some brief announcements. At the Edwin Black Show and our companion YouTube site, we have just released more compelling and gut-wrenching episodes. The key episode at the moment for you to look at and study is Kristallnacht 2.0 Part 3. I think that this is one of the most important and gut-wrenching episodes we have ever produced, and I urge you to watch it in its entirety and share its content. My tour continues. A few days ago, December 11th, I hosted an important congressional event with author Ken Abramowitz, launching the third edition of his prescient book, The Multi-Front War, and the event featured appearances by UAE Rabbi Elliot Badi, Sarah Stern, president of Emet, JNS Jerusalem Bureau Chief Alex Trayman, former Representative Trent Franks, and Canadian privacy guru Sharon Polsky, among others. Next month, January 24, I deliver a 5-event series, 3 daily events with the Gross Family Center for the Study of Anti-Semitism and the Holocaust at Florida Atlantic University, Boca Raton Synagogue, 800 expected to attend my presentation, and Palm Beach Gardens Chabad. Then I crossed the state to Tampa, where I returned to the University of South Florida Hillel. And internationally, in February, it's a return to Mexico City for a powerful community-wide 4-event series sponsored by Yad Vashem. In March of next year, I keynote the Canadian Privacy Conference in Montreal, and then much more from Hillcrest Jewish Center in Queens, New York, to an exciting return in May to Australia. Get details of all my appearances from edwinblack.com/events, and let us meet up in your city. Stand tall, and I will stand with you. Again, I remind of a terrible website you must know about, publishing the war crime documentation videos. It is Hamas-massacre.net. That is Hamas-massacre.net. This is the vile documentation we must confront, just as we did after the Holocaust. But this, I'm afraid, is a magnitude worse. These atrocities were not committed decades ago, but just weeks ago. Not hidden, but advertised and broadcast to a cheering Palestinian world. When this is done, there will be war crime trials in Jerusalem. This documentation on this website will be vital to that process. We are now in the midst of World War J, the global war against the Jews in the Middle East, here at home in America, and roiling through the nations of the world. Let us start with the swords of iron, Israel's war to destroy Hamas. Israel, at this moment, is collapsing Hamas. First day, they drove the bulk of them out of the north into the south, and now they have the remnants of the north battle groups surrounded. Scores of them have been filmed at the Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza in an orderly line, shirts off, dropping their weapons into a pile and submitting to capture by the Israeli army. At the same time, Israel is starting to flood the tunnels of the south to drive out the killers, while there are all sorts of critics wondering if this is a proper move. No one in Washington, the media, or anywhere said a word when Egypt did the exact same thing 10 years ago, but instead of using seawater, they used vile sewage flow. Flooding the tunnels is employing a non-lethal, non-explosive method of flushing out Hamas killers, and we think they will take their trading cards, the hostages, with them. Hey, remember they wanted from the river to the sea? Well, here's the sea part. As Israel has declared, it will not stop until Hamas is utterly destroyed, and that means killed or captured, and that means every leader, commander, armed terrorist, water boy, message courier, and falafel server. The day after, right now, is a blank space. There will be no two-state solution. There will be no self-governance, perhaps self-administration. Bibi Netanyahu has declared, quote, there will be no Hamasistan or Fatahistan. That is all a pipe dream which has been shattered with the shards lodged deep within the Israeli body politic. You see, Israel was going for the gold, self-deluded about the glittering gleam of peace. They tried everything. They embraced the words of appeasement, negotiation, international pseudo-diplomacy, and polite society, as well as outright bribery, Israeli employment, higher education, and even straight cash in suitcases regularly. All of it became the trappings of this gold enticement. But this was fool's gold. It shattered in their hand and destroyed the hand that held out for peace and accommodation. Now we see Gazan workers who were faithfully employed, whose relatives were ushered into the best hospitals in the Jewish state. It was these longtime Gazan workers who actually provided the house-by-house maps to the homicidal maniacs who came knocking door to door with their death, their destruction, torture, and sexual torment. There will be no two-state solution. The so-called Palestinians, that is the local Arabs who in 1964 committed identity theft and stole the term Palestinian from Jewish Zionists, they have wasted their last chance. They have spurned billions of dollars in foreign aid, taught their children to stab innocent Israelis on the street corner, run them over in suicide car crashes, learn to breathe and exhibit hate toward their neighbors, resist democracy with no elections, and they have nurtured over a generation a Frankenstein cult of death-loving, murderous Gazans, where children by the hundreds of thousands are trained in summer camps how to murder Jews and then dispose of their bodies, where schools are named for terrorists, where millions in foreign aid is openly paid as salary to murderers who slit the throats of babies as the highest duty of their society, where mothers brag to cameras over their dead terrorist children that they rejoice in their death and only hope to bear two more to achieve the same, where the headlines are now filled with Palestinian polls, especially the one by Berzit University, showing 70% or more fully support the massacres and rapes of October 7, not too different from the student and faculty bodies of Columbia University and Harvard, where the Palestinian Authority has repeatedly declared that the two-state solution of the Oslo Accords is deader than a coffin nail, and where they have defiled its very essence by conducting a campaign of illegal settlements in Area C, which is under full Israeli civil control. And this is all funded by terrorist organizations, where billions of dollars in uplifting opportunities have been sterned because no fortune and endowment, no elevation of their society is worth the humiliation they feel by living in simple peace next to a Jewish state. We cannot give water pipes to Gaza so they can be stolen into a massive missile tube array. Not every people on the planet get their own nation. You have to earn it. And the history books are filled with groups, hateful and benign, that have not achieved statehood, from the Aryan Brotherhood in Idaho to the Waziri province in Afghanistan to ISIS in Syria. Both the UAE and Saudi Arabia have announced they will not, repeat, not support rebuilding Gaza in the absence of a clear and permanent two-state solution, which is fully adopted by Hamas. And since there isn't one man or woman in Gaza who supports a two-state solution, let alone the release of even one hostage, not even the youngest of baby hostages, that is not going to happen. The fraud and mass delusion, it's over. The fake refugees in fake refugee camps supported by a fake refugee special purpose UN agency called UNRWA, it's over. Switzerland's National Council, the lower parliamentary house, approved total defunding of their annual contribution of $22.83 million, the vote being 116 to 78. Other parts of the EU are considering the same. So what will the day after in Gaza look like? The society will have to be rebuilt from the ground up, as was done in Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, Saddam's Iraq, and attempted in America's Confederacy in the United States South. No one will have national rights in Gaza or the West Bank. They will have civil rights, as was originally intended when multiple nations were contemplated for the region at the beginning of the 20th century. The Gazan territory will be administered as a non-sovereign territory, completely devoid of militarizations. There are many such territories, such as Wales and Scotland, such as occupied Berlin for decades after World War II. The Palestinian Authority will be kept for as long as its fig leaf remains functional. Gaza can have hospitals and higher education, but everything above ground and for the benefit of themselves and to the exclusion of mass murder and a hate philosophy. No matter what Washington says and no matter what Netanyahu listens to, no one has the right in democratic Israel to agree to a future Palestinian state. No one in Israel will tolerate a Palestinian state, not even an independent Palestinian zip code. It's over. The road to statehood is not to be paved over the slit throats of babies and their roasted bodies, monsters. Call me in 50 years of peace and we can discuss this matter once again. And don't ask me about the innocent civilians. This society of death created this situation, and now they complain. This brings to mind the well-known case of the man who murders his parents and then cries for mercy from the court because he is an orphan. Yet Israel is exercising innovative means of protecting civilians unheard of in the annals of warfare. Humanitarian corridors, block-by-block warnings, fuel and food convoys, even though they're hijacked by Hamas, and even the delivery of incubators to hospitals. Even Admiral Kirby at the White House concedes that Israel is taking extraordinary humanitarian steps that even the United States would not take. And indeed, we know they were not taken by the United States. In Normandy, in Hamburg, in Nagasaki, in North Korea. So what is going on between Washington and Jerusalem right now? We see two Joe Bidens before us. The man himself loves Israel and supports Israel and is continuously helping Israel militarily, diplomatically, and every other way. Unbeknownst to the public, America just granted 5 things that Israel needs to finish the job in Iran and destroy their nuclear infrastructure. And soon we shall see that occur. But Joe Biden is an empty suit who cannot control his Jew-hating and Israel-hating administration. The Democratic Party we knew will soon disappear and be subsumed by a Nazi-style party of Jew hatred. It's coming faster than you think. Even now, while we have the unbelievable spectacle last night of dozens of White House workers demonstrating with masks on and keffiyehs outside the White House fence, demanding that their president, Joe Biden, order a ceasefire. And all that means is that Hamas survives to perpetrate its promised repeats of the October 7th carnage. Moreover, the White House is getting constant extortion from the Muslim communities of CAIR and Michigan to withhold votes and kill his next year presidential bid unless he stops supporting Israel. So he and his staff say one thing for public consumption, but then do another thing privately for as long as this continues. Remember, Israel cannot be asked both to speed things up and slow things down for precision in civilian and non-combatant casualties. There will be no ceasefire, and Netanyahu has no authority to call for it. Israel will pursue its goal if it has to do so with its bare hands, and we will never, and it will never, endure another monstrous attack as we saw October 7th. Yemen and Iran, write it down. You're next. Lebanon, you have been self-nominated, but let's hope you do not self-elect yourself to join this war and enter the realm of destruction for real, as you will be demolished in a well-established plan that you know is sitting in the computers of the Israeli Defense Force. Now, the other half of World War J is the Jewish half. In America, where Nazified Palestinian agitators and their allies on the campus and in tax-exempt organizations and amongst the unlearned and easily manipulated Twitter class, free speech, we cherish it, is intended for the press and the public square. You can't shout incitement or encourage harm or genocide from the river to the sea. Remember, what Israel is doing is self-defense, not genocide, but calling for the ethnic cleansing and extermination of 10 million Israelis. Write it down, Harvey. Calling for the ethnic cleansing and extermination of 10 million Israelis is itself genocide. Rashida Tlaib and your Jew-hating friends in the Democratic Party, hear this and hear it, everyone. Go to the International Genocide Treaty. Everybody can find it on the internet. Article 3, subsection 3, quote, direct and public incitement to commit genocide is a punishable crime within the laws of genocide. That's why Nazi propagandists such as Goebbels and Streicher faced Nuremberg prosecution and conviction. So, before Rashida and her buddies called for Palestine to be free from the river to the sea, as the Nazis called for Judenreich, I hope someone will refer her to the International Criminal Court. This brings us to the epicenters of hate cultivation in this nation. It is not the beer halls of neo-Nazis, but the academic halls of Harvard, MIT, and Pennsylvania that have become the cesspools of anti-Semitism, backed up by false facts, false history, and false intellectuals being consumed by false experts who run around and thinking they know something, but they are not alone. Right behind those three institutions is USF in Tampa. I'll see you next month. Duke University, UC Berkeley, and Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. And they were just sued, Carnegie Mellon, yesterday by the Lawfare Project for pervasive anti-Semitism and so many others which have been the recipient of so many billions of money from Qatar and Iran interests. I have to wonder if some of this money going to these colleges is actually grist for a FARA prosecution. How can a school take millions of dollars to reflect the will of a foreign country with profound terrorist ties such as Qatar and avoid FARA scrutiny? Lawsuits like the one filed against Carnegie Mellon yesterday, UC Berkeley, they're just the beginning. They have been generated at the rate of about one a week, and many more are coming your way. Moreover, New York Governor Hochul says she is prepared to prosecute any college or university in her state, New York, that allows its campus to be used for hate or anti-Semitism. We thank the Brandeis Center, Stand With Us, Sadoff Legal, the Lawfare Project, and many other defense groups, big and small, for carefully and intrepidly filing these lawsuits. We cannot survive the current surge in violent, repeat, violent and harassing anti-Semitism, where the bitches and bastards of hate mongering are allowed to multiply amongst uninformed public, unless we cooperate educate, coordinate, and litigate. Litigation means intelligent, skilled litigation crafted to succeed juridically with valid plaintiff and expert attorneys. We need every lawful weapon wielded. The weapon of knowledge, the weapon of boycotts, the weapon of political pressure, litigation. And when you're done with the first litigation, more litigation against the colleges and universities, pernicious city councils such as Burlington, Vermont, and Oakland, California, and the tax-exempt organizations who fuel it all. Do you hear me, George Soros? Defund the colleges, move against their academic certifications, sue the actual anti-Israeli individuals and organizations obstructing and afflicting our society, our highways, our stores, our campuses, and our synagogues. The monsters have emerged from the crevices of our world to repeat what they have done generation to generation throughout history. This time, the war will be different. This time, the Jews will not run. We will fight back with everything we have. When the dust clears, the Jews and the world will emerge shining and strong in the dust and destruction of our World War J. Now, I've left out 99% of everything because I have so many questions pending. And we have a huge audience and many questions from all over the place. Okay, wow, there's just so much here. Let me start with the watch party in the villages. Thank you, Edwin, for your continuous education. Who is supporting the illegal Area C settlements, and how is this done if it's under Israeli control? It works this way. The money is being generated and funded by terrorist groups, the PFLP, Palestinian Front for the Liberation of Palestine, through lots of front organizations. I exposed this in my investigation, which was published in the JNS. Now, what they do is the very first thing they do is they go in and they build a small school. This is a well-known procedure. They build a small school, and then they plow a road in an empty area, they build a small school, and then they build a health clinic, and they build a mosque. There is no building permit, there is no territorial right, there's no Oslo permission, it is Israeli territory. Why do they do this? Because they want Israel to remove the structure, because nothing plays better on the international stage than for somebody to call up Wes and say, hey, Wes, look, they're destroying a school, they're destroying a clinic, they're destroying a mosque. And once they have that, they build a number of tents and they turn those into houses. And lo and behold, you have a illegal settlement and the money pours in, the construction equipment pours in, and it's all intended to make Israel react. What does Israel do? They say, hey, we need to get through the weekend. We need to get to Shabbat. Their TV cameras are going to be there. It's going to look awful if we take down these illegal settlements. It's okay if we take down a Jewish settlement. That's hunky-dory. But if we take down this Palestinian settlement, it's going to look awful. And so they just ignore it. And in some cases, rambunctious youth in Judea and Samaria, they don't ignore it. And when the agitational Palestinians have a program of planting 25,000 olive trees on land they do not own on their neighbor's land, they wait for these guys to remove the olive trees so then they could send out a video saying, look, they're removing our olive trees. How would you like your neighbor to plant a garden across the fence in your backyard? That's what goes on. And so that is how it's done. And if you need more, please see my investigation on Area C. From the watch party in Newton, Mass. If Gaza is so collapsed and crushed, how is it they have the ability to shoot hundreds of rockets at civilian areas of Israel, even today and yesterday? That's a great question. And the answer is there's lots of food and lots of stores and lots of fuel in the underground Hamas tunnels. I should add that while there's 300 to 400 miles of military tunnels that Hamas controls under Gaza, there is not one bomb shelter for the so-called civilians, or shall I use the term non-combatants. And so for this reason, we see 2 months after day in, day out, punishing bombardment and door-to-door combat, still we see scores of missiles being shot at Tel Aviv. And by the way, when they shoot these missiles at Tel Aviv, remember, they're not just shooting at Jews, they are shooting at Arabs. Why? Because Tel Aviv is across the street from Jaffa. All you got to do is go 30 seconds south of Tel Aviv, and you're in Jaffa, which is an Arab community. There are Arabs all over the Israel. There's Arabs in Nazareth and northern Israel. There's Arabs and Ethiopians and Eritreans and people of many nations living and working in Israel. When you go to a hotel or a modern enterprise in Israel, you see tons of people from different countries. They don't care about that. All they care about is they will go down in a blaze of glory. Even when they were collapsing, they boldly bragged on TV that they would repeat this time and time again, maybe 4, 5, or 6 different extra times. And so there's another fraud going on, that the people of Gaza are without food, without sustenance. Yes, there is that problem for those who have been denied by the government of Hamas, the culture of Hamas that they put in there. So the only address that you need to contact about that question is Hamas. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations correctly held up the phone number of Hamas in Gaza. Give that number a call. This is what they strove for. This is what they pleaded for. Watch party in Chicago. What are the 5 things the U.S. granted Israel to go against Iran's nuclear program? Not saying. You'll find out soon. Patty in London. Can you talk about Harvard? Harvard is finished. People are now talking about a cherem, that means untouchability, on Harvard. It has been stated that the testimony of these 3 insensitive presidents, UPenn, Harvard, and MIT, was the worst such action in the history of Congress, and I agree. Interestingly enough, there was a resolution passed that the 2 remaining presidents, the president of Harvard and MIT, that's Kornbluth in MIT and Miss Gay in Harvard, that was voted against by 148 Democrats. These are the Democrats, and passed by the Republicans. But Miss Gay is being supported by all sorts of her faculty and by her board. And so they're entrenched. They're not going to do anything about it, even though she's fighting plagiarism accusations by sources within Harvard and in the general public, which has shown the side-by-side words that she has published and the sources of alleged plagiarism. She's going to stay for as long as she wishes to stay. Now, she could resign tomorrow, but for now, she is going to stay. So what does this mean? This means that Harvard has now sunk to the nadir of academic credential. Its faculty is among the worst. Just today, I read and saw a video by the Chabad rabbi of Harvard, who was lighting the menorah for Hanukkah on the campus. They're allowed to light the menorah, but in other years where it has burned overnight, now they have to pack it up and they have to hide it somewhere so that the menorah on Harvard, enlightened Harvard, is not vandalized, is not criminalized, is not defaced. just as they're defacing menorahs all over the United States, just as they're defacing menorahs in Oakland, California, in Michigan, and many other places. So if you've got a student applicant from Harvard, reject him. We have to draw a line in the sand of civilization. We must choose. You're either with the light or you're against the light. There's no question about, is it okay to call for the genocide of Jews? Can you imagine this idiot McGill from UPenn who said, if you call for the genocide of Jews, it could become harassment if it's put into effect. Now, just think about that for a second. Genocide is mass murder. So what she's saying is, show us the mass murder, and then we'll declare the speech to be hateful. Can you imagine this? And this is the president of a university. And Gay was so smug and repug. So we need to now make a cherem, pull your students out, pull your donations out, pull your hiring and recruitment out. And I assure you, many people are doing this. The name Harvard is not today the gleaming emblem that it was a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago. Now it is very, very tarnished. Thank you very much, London. Hope to see you soon. Holly, how does this war play out with reference to the U.S. and the UN? She's in Nashville. And can you talk about Biden's comments yesterday? Well, let me first talk about Biden. You see, we had this two-faced Biden. Biden spoke to his Israel-hating fundraisers and made this nasty comment that Israel is indiscriminately bombing Gaza. He knows that's false. And at the same time, the next day, he says it's not true. So you have Biden political guy saying that they're bombing indiscriminately civilians, and then you have the other Biden saying, no, it's not true. And at the same time that this was done, we are vetoing UN Security Council and the General Assembly. General Assembly, of course, is non-binding. It's just suggestive. And the Security Council, which is binding. We vetoed the ceasefire there because a ceasefire means Hamas survives and regroups to carry out and perpetrate its promise of another half dozen October 7 massacres. In addition to that, Israel is being given funds. It's being given 122 millimeter shells, 155 millimeter shells, Tamir missiles. It's being given those 5 things, and those 5 things just were given yesterday. So there are 2 Bidens, one playing to his innermost feelings to support Israel, and the other playing to the Jew haters within the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party will soon be the new Nazi party in the United States. And I don't want anyone to tell me about the Christian supremacists in the Republican Party. It's fine. I don't have anything to fear based on what I see from the Republican Party day in, day out. Vote in, vote out. Support in and support out. But I have plenty to fear from the people who are punching the Jews, harassing the Jews, shooting outside their synagogues, threatening openly to slit their throats. And those are the voters who are organizing in Michigan. They've already stated in Michigan, where I believe there's 150,000 registered Muslims, they're already stating, we now announce that Joe Biden will never be reelected. These calls go into the White House. They get nervous about them, and then they make some statements. So it's a question for how long Joe Biden can be true to his innermost feelings, his long-held feelings of love for Israel and for the Jewish state that's shared by so many in this country. And then I'm going to answer a question from Indiana. How long can that go on in the face of the threats he's getting from the rising tide of Nazi-style anti-Semitism within the Democratic Party? Remember, They will cripple the Democratic Convention. They will assault the platform. And on a local level, they will nominate and elect Jew haters at the city council and state level to have an impact on national policy. So that's that. Now, how does this war play out with reference to the UN? UN has nothing to say about it. The UN can't stop this war. The UN can't stop the Ukraine war. The UN can't stop the genocide against the Uyghurs that China is committing. The UN can't do anything about American bombing in the Middle East. They can't do anything about the women being afflicted in Afghanistan. This is an artificial body of world peace that grew out of a previous artificial body of world peace, the League of Nations, that never stopped the rape of Nanking by the Japanese, never stopped the invasion of Africa by the Italians, never stopped Nazism, never stopped Sovietism, and never did a thing to stop the Hitler regime. So we have to survive both of these impulses, the impulse to pay attention to the UN, which is just making noise to serve its masters, Russia and China, and or what's happening in the Biden Democratic Party. Thank you very much. Next, Morris and Herzliya. Talk about if not now. They have been demonstrating and blocking the highways in Los Angeles. There's an organization called If Not Now, and also known as INN, and they advertise themselves as Jewish. They're outcasts from the Jewish community. They are rejects from the Jewish mainstream. They're completely twisted and uninformed, and they use their Jewish identity or so-called Jewish identity to mitigate. They've been weaponized against the Jews themselves, and they are funded by these well-known 501c3s. They're funded, they and groups like them are funded by Soros, the Tides Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and many others. There's a move afoot in Washington to do now what I started many years ago when I did my funding hate investigation. At that time, the Ford Foundation came this close to losing its 501c3. I encourage everyone to be in touch with your legislators, to be in touch with the IRS and your local attorney general in your state to investigate these organizations' activities in your own state. So, just like Jewish Voice for Peace does not represent Jews, not a Jewish voice, it doesn't represent peace, just like If Not Now claims to be Jewish, and they throw on these taluses and they put little yarmulkes on and chant and sing like they represent someone. They represent no one. They aren't even as representative of the Jews who chose the golden calf over Moses. They're that much of an outcast. So ignore them, take action against them, and by all means, pull off their masks. Take pictures of them, sue them, report them to the police. If you've been civilly hurt by them blocking the LA freeway, you have a right to take action against the organization, against those who funded them and who conspired with them and who were aware of what they would do. Their leaders, the participants, take action. The only way we're going to win World War J is by finally taking every legal action that we can. Thank you for that. Here's Melanie in Jacksonville. BLM, the trans community, and climate activists have all come out for Hamas. What do you think about that? Melanie in Jacksonville. She's asked questions in the past. Yes, you are so correct. BLM, which is the corporate BLM, which is different from the average person in the street who may support BLM just on ethical grounds, but corporate BLM, which is a group of criminals, they have supported this monstrous action, And it says to me and to the community, do not support them. Show no solidarity with them. As far as the trans community, there are many people in the trans community who are demanding to support Hamas as part of a trans revolution. This is the stupidest thing in the history of the world. Listen to me, trans people, or if you know a trans person, if you are trans and you show up in Gaza, you are going directly to the rooftop. They will tie your hands behind your back. They will shoot you in the knee, and they will throw you over, or they will hang you from the nearest crane. This is just emblematic of how stupid the current generation is. So I don't want to hear anything about guys dressing up to look like women, guys with beards putting lipstick on and thinking they're women. This world is loaded with exceptional women who gave rise to the entire planet and to all our generations. And being a woman is more than slapping lipstick on your lips and learning to walk in high heels. And if you're a transvestite and you think that Hamas is with you, go over there and see what they do to these people. It's not just Iran that hangs such people from the construction cranes. They do it in Gaza all the time. As far as the climate control people, I don't want to hear about climate control anymore, because right now, Greta Thunberg has taken over in my mind for the iceberg. When Greta Thunberg can change, I'll think about how the iceberg can change. There is natural climate change in this world. It's unstoppable. Today, I read about a study in the UK that blamed a certain percentage, a fraction of a percent of climate change on human breathing. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, on exhaling normal air. And apparently, certain people under many conditions can breathe a certain amount of methane and nitrous oxide, and this is counted in the climate's problems. Look, we're going to have to adapt. Right now, today, there are people in northern Canada. There are people in Greenland. There are people in Siberia who are living in frozen conditions, and they thrive. There are people in the UAE, in Phoenix, are in southern Texas, in parts of Mexico, who are burning in 135-degree temperature and have for many generations. Part of being human is adapting. The climate has changed many times. Human beings have changed many times. But once we see that Greta Thunberg and many thousands like her have now gone with the Palestinians, which are equivalent to Hamas in my mind and their own mind and the mind of others, we are all Hamas kind of a thing. Once they do that, there's no need for me to trust one syllable that they say. When Thunberg is gone, I can worry about the iceberg being gone. But until that time, I'm worried about the Jewish people surviving today, not in 40 years. Oh, I'm worried about that too, but I was referring to the climate. This is a question from Rudy in Philadelphia. Are you surrounded by yes men in your organization? I'm surrounded by no men and no women. I'm surrounded by intensely intellectual men and women all over the world, most of whom have very strongly held beliefs about many of the topics that I talk on, and they make their opinions known to me as often as they feel that they should. And they're good intellectual people, but fortunately, they're tolerant people, and they base their opinions on intellectualism. Okay, let's see what else I've got 6 new messages. Carolyn Greenberg. Carolyn just reminds me that 15% of exhaled breath is CO2. Let me tell you something. Human beings are part of the planet, and we got a right to breathe, period. here is a note from Sacramento from Mark, who says that Financing the Flames is a book I wrote, which I did write several years ago. I guess I have a copy here, which over 10 years ago laid out the pathways of charitable funding of anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish activities. It was this book, by the way, that revealed the existence of what I would call an open program to pay salaries to terrorists with the more you kill, the more you get paid. Thank you, Mark, for reminding me of the book that I wrote. Let's see what else we have. From Charles, since there are crazy anti-Semites in both parties, why do you continue to call out the Democrats as enemies of Israel? Based on their actions, based on what they do, based on what they say, based on their threats, based on the squadron, based on the Democrats at the local level, not the federal level, what is actually being done. And I'm a person who is very keen to take note of the anti-Semitic actions on the city level, the state level, and the national level. And I can tell you that I've seen almost nothing from support from body politic of the Republican Party. That's the base, and its elected officials. Does that mean that there's no anti-Semitism in the Republican Party? Absolutely not. But I'm talking about actions. What actions do we see day in, day out from the Democratic Party? Voting against Israel, refusing to vote against anti-Semitism, organizing rallies against the Jewish people. That's why I say that, Charles, and I thank you for your excellent question. From Christine in Indiana. Wait a minute. I want to answer another question from Christine from a week ago, and maybe from others. I was asked this question. Do I think that America is an anti-Semitic nation? And here's my answer. I'm so happy I remembered this. I observe and am aware of and am impacted by anti-Semitism every second of every minute of every hour, 25 hours a day, 8 days a week. It's everywhere. But I do not feel that this is an anti-Semitic nation. In fact, I believe it's the opposite. Even though there has been so much anti-Semitism manifested in this nation, institutionally, and by the growing Nazi-style base of the Democratic Party, I do not feel that America is anti-Semitic or against Israel. And everywhere I go, I work with Christians, I work with non-Jewish communities from stem to stern, from coast to coast, and I see nothing but support. And that means that the country, the people in the country, live with and accept the Jewish people as part of their Judeo-Christian calling. And it is the loud ones, the obnoxious ones, the protesters, the agitators, who are trying to batter the rest of the country into joining their crusade against the Jews. And everybody knows that if the Jews go on Saturday, it's the Christians on Sunday. Everybody knows it. It's been that way in regime after regime, whether it's in communist Russia, whether it's in Germany, or anywhere else. Now, Christine's question, how will the 2024 U.S. election impact this situation? It's going to be a very strange animal. Even I, with as much analysis as I do, cannot predict what is going to happen. But we all know who's going to run, and people are going to have to make choices. Are they going to choose the obnoxious guy, the brute, the bully with excellent policy that supports freedom and individual rights and Israel? Or are we going to support the criminal who has been running a scam, an international shakedown scam worth $21 million for years, and who has lied to the public and does not control his party. On top of that, will his party allow him to run? So understand this: the decision of who runs as the presidential candidate for the Democrats will not be made by the primaries. The primaries have already, such as in Florida, have already excluded legitimate candidates. It's true they may only have 1 or 2 digit support, maybe 15 to 20% support, but they have a right to run. They're being kept off the primaries. It's going to be the back room that decides. And somewhere along the way, the Democrats will not give up power, and the Democrats will parachute somebody in a decision made at the convention, okay? Just as we have seen in prior Democratic conventions. Now, it's not going to be like that on the Republican side, but there are going to be forces of violence and upheaval that will try to impact the Democratic convention. The Democrats will accommodate, and the Democrats will accommodate, and the Republicans will resist. But I don't know if the dynamics of what we're seeing now in Israel can last until January of 2025. And I've said it many times before, and I say it again. If the wrong people get into power in the next November election, the Jews of this country will be dispossessed, and Israel will be internationally and diplomatically decimated, and Hamas will be weaponized with all the modern weapons of war. Thank you, Christine, for that question. Here's from Wes in the West Coast, in the Bay Area. What were the politics of the Pennsylvania synagogue shooter, which was the worst shooting of its type in our history? Does that mirror the politics of similar shooting incidents targeting Jewish people in the U.S.? I would say that when you're looking at these sorts of right-wing crazies, and just because you're a right-wing crazy does not mean you're a Republican crazy, just as if you're a left-wing crazy, an anarchist like Antifa, it doesn't mean that you're a Democratic crazy. So those cases do not really reflect parties, and they're aberrations. It's true, they happen, they're horrible, they're reviling, but those are happening once in a while, once in a detested while. What we are concerned about is what is happening hour to hour, minute to minute, by the people who now constitute, write this down, Wes, the Democratic base. Is the Democratic base rooting for Israel? Is the Democratic base rooting for the Jewish people? Or is it doing something else? And so you're bringing up the Pennsylvania synagogue shooter is really not a relevant question. I understand why you did it. You wanted me to say, well, they're right-wing crazies, and therefore they're Republican. They have nothing to do with the Republican Party, just as Antifa literally has nothing to do with the Democratic Party. But thanks for your question, Wes. All right, let's go with another one. This is San Francisco. How many felony charges have been filed against Joe Biden? How many felony charges have been filed against Donald Trump? Why does this not concern you? Why do you think it doesn't concern me? It concerns me plenty. No felony charges have been filed against Joe Biden yet. All the felony charges have been filed against his son and business partner. And I'm sure you've written down that 91 charges have been filed against Donald Trump, including some that have never been undertaken in the history of the United States, such as the ones in New York. Your analogies on climate change are misleading. If we curtail fossil fuel burning, we would significantly mitigate climate change. Do you agree? I don't know. Something could speed up climate change or slow it down in a hurry. I know climate change is an absolute certainty, because the earth is an organic living object that has been changing many, many times throughout the millennia of the millions of years that have gone by. Now, I do think that we should mitigate, but we have to mitigate intelligently. We can't say everybody but China gets to shut down their coal plants. We can't say that we should all use electric cars. Those electric cars are going to need to be supplied by electric infrastructure. You only get electricity from power plants. 63% of the power plants are run by fossil fuel. The reality, based on my years of work in climate change and alternative fuels, and Mark is listening and he knows this, he's in Sacramento, there is no solution other than a volumetric. That is the best solution. That means how much power can you put into a space this big? And that's volumetric. And that means you must have a fluid. And that fluid can be ethanol, it could be methanol, it could be a bacterial generated product that doesn't exist, and it could be non-polluting, repeat, non-polluting fluids. There are many non-polluting fluids that we can run. I myself, as you know, ran in California from a public shell station on water that was converted to hydrogen. So we don't all need electric cars. We can have volumetric cars, we can have CNG cars, propane cars, etc. But my main topic is not what do we do with the climate now. My main topic is that for some reason, the climate crazies have adopted the side of Hamas. For some reason, the brat Greta has adopted the Palestinian cause, has refused to condemn what happened on October 7th. And this means something to me. When someone is spouting science at you, is spouting facts and factuality and predicting the future, and it turns out that they're supporting the hate and murders of October 7th or refusing to condemn them, this is something that we all must take notice of. Thank you. Let me see if I could take one more question that is a genuine question and not looking for an argument. Well, I'm just reminded here by someone that a huge investigation of the Soros money machine was done by Rachel Ehrenfeld, who published something called the Soros Agenda. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say we're out of time. I want you to hold for my closing word of wisdom. Just 1 minute away. You get access alerts to participate live in future shows at theedwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show. You can follow me at Edwin Black Book on that thing called X, as well as Facebook. And now, for my closing word of wisdom. When history returns to rule the day, we must decide, do we repeat it or do we defeat it? Thank you, world. I'm zooming out. Bless all of you.